Allegations of racist chants and a police officer injured in what the Met has described as some of the most shocking violence they've seen for some time. What is going wrong with football? The violent scenes coming up in Simon Harris's report take many fans back to the bad old days of the 1980s. The Millwall Everton FA Cup clash on Saturday was quite simply a disgrace to the sport. What is being done?
It might have been a chance encounter, more likely it was pre-arranged. However it happened, this was the result. Rival fans trading blows on a housing estate in Rotherhithe. People living in flats watched the punch-up from their balconies. The fans weren't only attacking each other, but the police too.
Throwing bottles, sticks, stones onto the police officers.
How scary was it?
It was quite scary, and I've never had such a noise in this area before.
This is Jay Burns, an Everton supporter whose face was slashed in the fight. He posted the picture on social media, although it's not clear how he came to be involved. A few streets away, outside a pub popular with Millwall fans, there was more violence.
Glass getting dashed. Oh my gosh, people's cars are getting
The police had to call in reinforcements.
No way.
The fighting in and around the Hawkstone estate was bad enough. But it's not just violence that the police are investigating. Inside the ground, there was racist chanting.
The word used is derogatory towards the Pakistani community, and it's still relevant within our game. So it's something that we need to challenge, and we need to make sure that we identify the perpetrators, and obviously it's the onus of the football club to do that.
The police say they're confident they'll soon identify the fans involved in Saturday's fighting. Note the two police officers using their batons to break up the brawl. The one on the left is also holding a video camera.
The disorder that occurred both before, during and after the Millwall versus Everton Cup match on Saturday was some of the most shocking football violence we've seen for some time.
But there was a time when the very word Millwall meant trouble. In the 1980s, Millwall fans had a notorious reputation for violence. This was a riot during a game against Luton.
I went to the club about a month ago to see them play, and you would be pleasantly, well, not pleasantly surprised, but you would be impressed by the way that club has done its very, very best to combat the image that they've sometimes had. And they will be more upset than anybody, the people at Millwall Football Club, with what seems to have occurred.
Football has cleaned up its act, but Saturday's trouble is a reminder not everyone is signed up. Simon Harris, ITV News, Rotherhithe.
We've a big night ahead in Westminster after a day of debate. In the next hour or so, the voting will begin on a series of amendments to the Prime Minister's Brexit plan. Theresa May is then planning to go back to the EU to try to reopen talks. Today, one Labour MP from London broke ranks by saying he'll vote with the government on one of those amendments. Our political correspondent Simon Harris is in Westminster tonight with the details. Take us through this one, Simon.
Yes, Nina, 2 weeks after Theresa May's deal to leave the EU was comprehensively rejected by MPs on all sides, there are signs tonight of some movement in the Brexit deadlock. Mrs May has accepted an amendment to her proposals which effectively tell her to go back to Brussels and get the EU to reopen negotiations to avoid a hard border in Northern Ireland. Now, she hasn't won over all Conservative MPs by any means, and she certainly hasn't won over Labour, which now wants to delay Brexit until the summer. But as you say, one Labour MP from the East End, Jim Fitzpatrick, has decided to defy his party and vote with the government.
I don't believe that a delay of another few weeks or a couple of months is going to change the situation. I think Parliament's got to do its job, it's got to arrive at a conclusion, it's got to make decisions. That's what we're paid to do here.
How hard is it for a Labour MP to back a Conservative amendment?
It's very difficult. It's very difficult to break the whip, and nobody does that lightly.
We wait to see how many other Labour MPs will do the same. It's by no means clear that the EU will be prepared to renegotiate Mrs May's withdrawal agreement. The Lib Dems, who are opposed to any form of Brexit, think that's highly unlikely.
Frankly, the EU, when we are 60 or however many days it is from crashing out of the European Union, are hardly going to turn around and say, yeah, that's fine, let's spend another 6 months discussing what these alternative arrangements might be. It's simply not going to happen.
The House of Commons has spent the afternoon debating a range of different proposals, renegotiating the withdrawal agreement, extending Article 50 to delay Brexit, ruling out a no-deal Brexit and giving Parliament control of the process. MPs will begin voting in less than an hour. Although the result won't be legally binding, it will give us some idea, Nina, of what sort of Brexit MPs might be prepared to allow.
All right, Simon Harris in Westminster for us this evening. Thank you. A teenager who was filmed attacking a car with a so-called zombie knife is spending his first night in a young offenders institution tonight after a ruling that his initial punishment was unduly lenient. Joshua Gardner's attack in Croydon last May was captured on a dash cam. He had been given a suspended sentence, but today the Court of Appeal jailed him for 3.5 years. One of the judges said a challenge facing society is the commonplace carrying of knives, and there can never be an excuse for having a weapon of that type. Our correspondent Simon Harris has the story.
He didn't know it, but this was Joshua Gardner's last taste of freedom for many months, arriving at court with his mum Sophia. In May 2018, Gardner used a 10-inch zombie knife to attack a car in Thornton Heath in South London. He and the driver had some sort of history.
He eventually smashed a window on the far side of the car and lunged into it with the knife towards the driver. The victim managed to open the driver's door and he ran off, leaving the vehicle behind.
Despite the compelling evidence of this dashcam video, the judge in Gardner's trial gave him a suspended sentence. The Attorney General thought that was far too lenient, and today the government took the case to the Court of Appeal.
We say that a fair and proper assessment would have driven the learned judge to the only available conclusion, which should have been that a custodial sentence of immediate effect was inevitable.
Gardner sat in the public gallery, only visible to the cameras when he stood up. He also has a conviction for using a knife to try to rob a 12-year-old boy on his way to school. But Gardner's barrister argued he had a troubled childhood with a lack of male role models.
The father figure that he did have, his eldest brother, Mrs. Bailey's firstborn child, tragically died. It meant that his other brother went completely off the rails.
The appeal court judges weren't swayed.
One of the challenges facing society is the commonplace carrying and use of knives. There can never be any excuse for carrying a weapon of the type which this offender carried on this day.
Gardner was given a new sentence of 3.5 years in a young offenders institution. Joshua Gardner clearly wasn't expecting to be sent to jail today. His barrister asked if he could go home with his mum to pack a bag and hand himself in tomorrow morning, but the judges weren't prepared to take the risk. The Solicitor General said the ruling sent a clear message.
Knives are weapons of injury and death, and they must not be carried by people without a lawful purpose.
Gardner's mother didn't want to talk to reporters as she headed home after the case.
Simon, you did manage to speak to her away from the cameras.
Yes, inside the court building, I spoke to his mother, Sophia Bailey, and clearly upset at what's happened to her son, but she's also angry at the involvement of politicians in her case. Remember back in November, when he was given the original suspended sentence, the Mayor, Sadiq Khan, was one of the first to criticise the judge. He wrote to the Attorney General's office, complaining that it was unduly lenient, and it was the Attorney General who launched today's Court of Appeal case. Now, the Mayor argued that the original sentence undermined public confidence. It simply sent out the wrong message at a time when London has a terrible knife and violence problem. The Mayor and the authorities are arguing that anyone who is caught carrying a knife must realise that they inevitably face jail. And Gardner, of course, didn't. So tonight, of course, the Mayor has, not surprisingly, welcomed the new sentence.
Simon, thank you very much. Thank you.
Good evening. It feels a bit like Groundhog Day. Every time we talk about Crossrail, it always seems to be a constant stream of stories about the project being delayed. And I'm afraid tonight is no different. We've now been told the new £17 billion line has no chance of opening this year. In fact, the project's boss doesn't even know when it will be ready. It's because of problems with signalling systems and station upgrades. But let's not forget, it was supposed to open last month. Our political correspondent Simon Harris has the story.
They're London's unfinished monuments, a chain of what should be gleaming new stations dotted across the capital. But like all the others, Whitechapel Station is still a busy construction site. When it will be ready is anybody's guess. Crossrail's new boss certainly doesn't know.
I can't see how this job can be actually delivered in calendar year 19. I don't actually know when it will be delivered after that. I don't actually know when it will be delivered after that.
This was the gloomy update from Mark Wilde to a Transport for London board meeting chaired by the Mayor. It's a long time since any good news came out of this project. For months, the Crossrail story has been one of delays, technical problems, multi-billion-pound bailouts, and above all, uncertainty. Crossrail was due to open last month, with the Queen travelling on the first train. But in the summer, the launch date was pushed back to autumn 2019. Now there are questions about whether it will even be ready to open in 2020.
It's extraordinary that 5 months to the day when we first heard that Crossrail wouldn't be opening on time, we still don't know when it will open and what the final bill will be for Londoners. £30 million a month it's now costing to get Crossrail back on track, and it's not going to open this year. I think it's astonishing.
The Elizabeth Line trains will eventually carry 200 million passengers a year, many of them commuters, eager for a fast and reliable service in from the suburbs and beyond.
People need to plan, they've got families, they've got businesses, and we just need to be aware of what's happening.
Hopefully they will come up with a date when it will be finished, but you know, I'm sure there are reasons for it.
The budget has gone overboard and it's still not being delivered yet, so some heads have to roll, I guess.
The 10 unfinished stations aren't the only hold-up. There are software problems with the new trains and signals. In the words of Crossrail's new chairman, we still don't have absolute clarity with exactly where we are. Not a great advert for a flagship transport scheme.
Simon, this has got to be getting pretty embarrassing for the Crossrail bosses. And as you say, we still don't know when, do we?
Yeah, we got a hint in December that the revised opening in the autumn of this year was looking a little bit dodgy, but this is the first confirmation and a pretty damning statement there from the new chief executive saying, I don't know exactly when it will be delivered. He doesn't know if it's going to happen this year or next year. Goodness knows, it might even be the year after, but at the moment, nobody knows. Now, we're told that there is a revised schedule being worked on. We were told that we should know sometime next month when the new opening date would be. Now we're told it's not going to be until the end of March before we know when they think it might open.
All right, Simon, thanks very much.